Hi, this is Kevin with Hideaway Homestead. We're showing today how to render beeswax. What I've done is I've collected all this extra wax. Some of it is the cappings off of our extractions that we've done. Some of it is just old comb that we didn't need anymore. What we do is we save it up, put it in a plastic bag or something, put it in the freezer or the refrigerator, keep it until you're ready to use it. And then what I've done is I've put a little bit of water in this pot, maybe about a quarter of the way full or half full, maybe not a whole lot. And then you just dump all the wax that you've got in here in pieces. Turn on the stove and let it heat up until it melts. Now you have to make sure that when you do this, you cannot leave this unattended. Beeswax is very, very flammable whenever you get it over a hot stove like this. So you have to make sure you stay right with it and watch it every step of the way. Now what I do is I just occasionally stir it and then just wait for it to melt. It takes a few minutes for it to melt, and then once we get it melted, we'll pour it into a bucket with water in it, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. And we'll use a strainer. What I use is a paint strainer from Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever. Put it in a 5-gallon bucket, put a little bit of water in the bucket, and then pour this into it, and it strains out all the big chunks of stuff that you don't want. Okay, so stay with me, and we'll go on to the next step in just a minute. I've got the wax melted down in the pot up here. I might point out that whenever you do this, you want to use a pot that you're not going to use for anything else, because you'll never get all the wax out of the pot that you use. So I suggest you go maybe to a thrift store somewhere and find just an old pot that you can use to melt the wax. Also, this 5-gallon bucket that I've got here, same thing. You'll never get all the wax out of this bucket, so you're going to want to use a bucket and designate that bucket just for this purpose. So what we're going to do at this point is I've got my screen in here. This is a paint strainer, as I said earlier. I'm going to use that. I've got water in the bucket. I've got about half a bucket full of water. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pick up the pot of wax that I've got melted on the stove over here, and we're going to pour that into this bucket right here. So let's get that going. Got an old towel underneath this bucket in case there's any splatters, and you want to do this real slow because believe me, it does splatter everywhere. Alright, so we got all that into there. So now all we have to do is let this sit for a while and cool down a little bit. And then once we're done with that, all of the big chunks of stuff that you don't want in your wax is going to be in this screen that we've got in here. The wax itself will go through this and into the water that we already had in here. So whenever we pull this screen out of here, you'll have all your wax in the bucket with the water. After that, I leave the bucket sit overnight, and the wax will come to the surface, and all the water and all the other particles will settle to the bottom of the bucket. So once your wax settles out, separates from the rest of the stuff, the wax will come to the top. So the next morning when you get up, if you leave it overnight, you come in here, you'll have a cake of wax, usually a couple, 3 inches thick, depending on how much wax you use, and it'll be at the top. Then what I do is I use one of these. This is a thing for putting icing on cakes that my wife had, and she never uses it, so she said I could use it. I take this and I run it around the edge of the bucket inside to separate the wax from the bucket, and then you can just usually lift that thing right out of there, that cake of wax. So we're going to go on with this process and let this settle, and we'll eventually pull this out of here in a couple of minutes and get that out of there. In fact, I might just go ahead and do that now so you can see what that looks like. And it can be kind of messy, so you want to be very careful when you do this. Wear old clothes or something that you don't want to get, that you don't mind getting messed up, 'cause sometimes it will get all over the place. Okay, so as you can see here, the water is already starting to settle the wax. See, the wax is already starting to solidify. This is some of the wax that came out from the inside. And you can usually just pull this off, this wax. If this water is still warm, this wax will settle down in there, and the warm water will remelt the wax. I'll learn to talk in a minute. The warm water will make the wax melt back, and it'll be a solid piece once again. But it can be kind of messy. Most of the time, what I usually do is whenever I do this little paint strainer thing is probably not going to be any good for anything else, so you can probably just take this, toss it, and that would be, you know, the best thing to do with it probably, unless you can clean it up. Now if you can clean it up and use it again, that's great, but I've never had real good success doing that. I have a couple times. They're cheap. I just bought some at Lowe's. I think there was 2 in a pack, and it seems like they were only a couple dollars or something like that, so it's not an expensive thing to do. Alright, so got that out of there. My stick. I use a piece of wood, a stick, to stir this stuff with and to do this with, and it doesn't matter. Mash this and make sure you got it all out of there, and then just let it sit for a while and let it solidify. And you should be good to go. This I'm just going to toss. This is the bucket of wax that we ended up with after we melted this down. As you can see, it's formed a cake in the top. So what we're going to do at this point now is to drain this water out of here and then pull this cake of wax out of the top of this thing. So let me pour the water out of this first to get that out. Make a mess. Alright. Now I just ran this thing around on the edge of this just to loosen this up, because this is not really easy to get out, but you just have to sort of pry it out. And once you get it, then it comes out like that in a cake. Okay, now on the bottom side of this, there's still some stuff on the bottom here that you don't want. So what we usually do is we just take something and scrape all that off and get rid of that. So as you're doing this, you just scrape this off, and sometimes you'll see, and I'll see there's a couple little beads in here of wax, little tiny little beads. Those are normal, they'll just bead up. But you want to scrape all this off of here and get this as clean as you can. And as you see, as you get down to the bottom of it, you start to see the wax again right here, the natural color of the wax. So then, once you get this all scraped out, then you're ready to go. Now you can see that with this one, there's still little bits and pieces of stuff still in the wax that didn't come out. So what you can do is you can remelt this wax again and filter it again through something to get the rest of that out if you need to. If you're going to use this for cosmetics or to use for other things that you make with beeswax, it has to be a cleaner, purer wax, then you would want to get that out. If you're just using it for candles or something that it doesn't really make a difference, then it's not a big deal. But if you had big chunks in here, then you'd still want to get those out. Okay, so that's what we've done with wax rendering. And we'll continue to clean this up and get this ready for us to use. This concludes our video on wax melting. We hope that you've learned something from this. If you have comments, leave them in the comments section. Also, we'd like to know, if you have bees and you've got wax that you melt, leave us a comment and tell us what you do with your wax. We're just sort of curious as to what other people do with their wax. There's so many things you can use the wax for, and we'd just like to know what other people do with their wax. So if you would, leave us a comment and tell us what you do with it. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. We'd love to have you come along with us on our journey and learn from us, and maybe we can learn something from you as well. We have a couple other videos on beekeeping that we've shot previously, so I'd like to also invite you to go back and watch those as well, and check those out, see what you think. Okay, so anyway, so until next time, thanks for joining us here on Hideaway Homestead.